So even at the time of doing this, the Trump tariffs are still in place. Whether they will be kept in place a month, 2 weeks, even a year from now, this is a lot of economic damage being done because it all depends on the will and certainly the madness of many of the Republicans to go along with this, because not all of them are in favor in this. There was a Republican who came out who said this the last time they did this, or this idea, it lost them control of the House and the Senate for over 60 years. And like I say, 2 days already, and all the markets just going down. It is just not good. At the moment, it really seems that our government in particular has got this idea that it can change Trump, that it can somehow talk him around. And admirable as that may be, hey, that's what diplomacy is all about, and I'm all for diplomacy. There must have eventually come a point where you just have to go, well, we've tried. We tried our best, but no matter how much we've tried, it ain't happening. And I don't think it will either. Even though I do applaud their attempts to try and do it, you know, I am not 100% sure it is going to work this time, because last time there were adults in the room, this time there are not. And these tariffs, the way that they've come up with them, make no sense. Economists are actually appalled and flabbergasted by how they've come up with this. And not only that, but there's apparently more to come. So who knows what else could get announced maybe next week. But I'll tell you this now, that Wisconsin election that took place could have a lot of consequences. A lot of consequences. And maybe we'll do that another time. But I want to talk about this because a lot of companies, a lot of global international companies have responded to this with very simple statements. They're all statements come down to this. There's just no winners. There is no winners in this trade. There's no winners whatsoever. But Trump still seems determined to go along with this, and Republicans so far holding their nerve. How much for longer, we don't know. But yeah, interesting to see how long they'll go along with this. But before we go back more into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there is the Patreon page. There's a Buy Me Coffee link where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So let's crack on then into this. There are no winners. Global companies respond to Trump tariffs. So the Guardian went and spoke to different big companies around the world, or big sort of exporters, big to small. And here's just a couple. So Italy, a Pacchino cheesemaker. So on the Italian island of Sardinia, makers of porcino, the hard and salty sheep's milk cheese, were digesting the news of the Trump's tariffs. About up to 70% of their products are exported to the US. They said, we need to understand it better. We will wait and see if they really mean 20%. But obviously, it has created some imbalance, said Salvo Tupada, the president of the OP Union Pazori, the association representing the island sheep and goat farmers. He said, we will have to see, at least for the next 10 days, how these new taxes, and let's call them that, will affect new orders and even indeed prices, which will be the thing that worries us the most. Porcino has been made in Sardinia for centuries, contributing to the myriad of Italian food delicacies in high demand from around the world. Italy's biggest food and drink orders in the US are wine, followed by olive oil, pasta, and cheese. And according to figures from the CIA, even the Italian Farmers Confederation. Sardinia is not a rich island. It gives a very particular of agriculture and tourism, Powell adds. But I am not, of course, any alarmist by nature. But we need to work together at the Italian and European level to try and ensure that this is managed and does not threaten our industry. All farmers have the same issues. It's a very delicate moment and needs to be managed well. So That's what's going on in Italy. That's how the cheesemakers are doing. This Ireland whiskey. Let me say it right. This is probably a very interesting one. So the EU and the US enjoyed a deal with 0 tariffs. Think about this. Before this happened, there were 0% tariffs on whiskey imports and bourbon until Trump put these tariffs in. But Connolly whiskey sells its bottles in the US for $30 to $50, depending on the edition. These prices would now rise to $36 and to $60 a bottle under the 20% tariffs now being imposed on the EU. So think about that. A $30 bottle of this whiskey is now rising to 36. That's a $6 increase. But the most expensive bottle is going from 50 to 60. So that's a $10 increase right there. And it all reflects what these tariffs are going to do to the American consumer. It is going to make things more expensive for them. So the company's founder, Michael Scully, hoped at least for a post-Brexit launch in the UK could make up for harm to his US market. He said these tariffs are very disappointing and bad for business. Outside the actual tariffs themselves, the uncertainty it will create will divert now an interest in investment that we had allocated to the US market over the medium term, he said. The US market is important to us, but it's not the be-all, end-all. We've invested a lot of time and money into the US market over the last 6 years, so it is unfortunate. But there are no winners in this. Currently, the 15 to 20% of our sales are to the US. And while we are getting a very good response to our product, it is already becoming a very expensive and difficult to make into play in. That said, as the company, we said we do intend to stay in the US, but the uncertainty that will be created by the tariffs will mean extra investment allocation over the medium term will now be diverted to other markets. And that's what you're going to see as well. Why invest in the US? Short term, medium term, why invest? You're going to see investment or companies invest in other areas, in other markets. And that will be bad, again, for US consumers, jobs, the economy overall. So while it takes 9 to 12 months to open a new market, whiskey is, of course, a very even longer term game. And we are very confident that we can now pivot easily. Our strategy has always been to become at least a recognized premium Irish whiskey brand in all the major whiskey drinking nations of the world. So opening into new markets is what we've been trying to do for quite some time. In addition, the growing now our Northern European base, we are trying to target growth areas in the Asian market. We already sell to Japan and South Korea, in discussions with distributors in China and Hong Kong. We also see the Australian market as a wide opportunity, given the connections with the large Irish diaspora, as in Nigeria. This month, we are excited to, of course, launch a new UK brand, which has been delayed because of Brexit. Given, of course, the very similar culture and closeness to the two nations, I see no reason why this market cannot fully replace any losses we've experienced in the US because of tariffs. And that is another thing as well. You will see companies, well, let's just pivot to other markets. Let's see what other markets take this. And you will see streams divert. All the supply streams will redivert. They will go elsewhere. I've said this before, and I'll keep on banging this drum. We shouldn't be trying to sign a deal with America right now. We should be going to Canada and trying to get one done. That is where we should be going. We should say, right, let's do some sectorial deals right now of what we can do. And I've said this before, energy will be the biggest one, because we could take Canadian crude oil, bring it over to here and refine it in our refineries. But the big problem is the infrastructure on our East Coast. That just needs to be built. And hey, as we said before, money talks. You know, we would want it built. Canada would want it built. There's a deal to be done there. And of course, as I said before, you can then use these small sectorial deals to then build up to a wider free trade agreement later down the line. That's where we should be really targeting right now. But going to the UK, they talked to a Savile Row tailor. So Brian Lishkin, the co-founder and the tailor of Richard Anderson, says it is actually a relief, I guess. We've done much to prepare more than we anticipated, and I hope that now with the negotiations we can perhaps even improve on the 10%. The US market is very strong for us. It is a market that we've really explored and developed since we opened over 23 years ago. From our point of view, the tariffs will affect shipments going to the US, but all is done by US Customs dealing with our customers. We will inform them that each item is subject to a 10% duty imposed by US Customs on entry. I really believe, and oh, by the way, that's the other thing that I've seen as well. There's talk apparently, like a lot of the Trump defenders are now trying to say that this tariff isn't going to be paid by US consumers, that it's going to be paid by the business. Well, you've just seen a business here say, well, yeah, we'll still sell it to the US, except your item is going to be subject to a 10% duty. They're passing that on to the consumer. That is what everyone has been saying constantly over this since the very beginning. Why are you going to do this? A someone who sells that product in the US is not going to suddenly go, oh yeah, we'll eat that 10% or that 20%. It's not how it works. But anyway, back to this. So anyway, he continued, or at least the owner of the tailor shop continued. I really did believe that the relationship we have with our customers is, of course, not going to be very much hurt. I don't believe it will have a very huge impact, but we have had, of course, these duties in the past, as our products do carry a duty of at least 21%, and we have at least managed. So that's going to go up even more. But I, go back to them in a year's time. I suspect that might have affected them. I'm sure, of course, we'll do the same this time. Obviously, it is a shame, but it will have to be, of course, dealt with. I think it won't be too hard to advise to an effect on our trade. Again, we'll see. We'll see. Go back in a year, ask this Savile Row tailor how much has he been affected by. I can guarantee you he will have been affected. He will have been affected. So Australia. This was something that came up. This was something that came up in the in Trump's big Liberation Day speech, and it really did sound like when he was talking about it that he was going to put a ban on Australian beef. That's how it sounded, but that's not what happened. But who knows what can happen in the next couple of days, weeks? He may decide to just ban Australian beef or put an even bigger tariff specifically on that Australian beef coming into or lamb into America from Australia. This is what the other talks are now happening, that next week we're going to see now sectoral tariffs come in. So what have they responded to this about? So John Lowe, the managing director of partner of the beef and cattle lamb, a farm business called J&F and Lowe, said, in a long-term multi-generational farmer, the family has been doing its best in this part for 200 years in Australia. Cattle would probably be at least 60% of our operation, 25 to 30% of our beef of that grade would then go to the US. A 10% tariff across the board for Australia was probably the best of a bad situation. We did better than some other countries and some other industries. But I'd be much happier if this hadn't happened. The surplus cows that we now sell may get, of course, just a little bit less money at this stage, but the market will tighten. But being a farmer, you've got to be optimistic to some degree. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in the game. In America, they haven't got enough beef domestically to feed their population. They've still got to get surplus of beef from somewhere. Another problem that they are hit with, you do not have enough domestic production for some of this stuff. America does not able to produce everything, so they will have to do this. They will have to import. It is impossible not to. But that will affect them as well. But anyway, he continues. We will obviously try to diversify our markets. Again, you're picking up this theme constantly. Everyone is saying this, trying to diversify, right? Trying to look to different markets. Um, America is, of course, the prime grinding beef market. That is certainly not, of course, the only place in the world where we could send that product. It won't replace a whole lot, but if you can just adjust at least the mix just a little bit, it might be helpful. This is uncertainty, which is, of course, really hard thing to plan for. It's a bit like musical chairs. No one wants to be left standing when the music stops or have a couple of hundred containers of beef now on the water. We will probably, of course, be very careful about making long term financial decisions until we've got a better view of where things are heading. We'll see how we muddle along. So the view from the cattle farmer is, yeah, we'll see. But again, no investment, diversifying the market. You're seeing you're seeing the pattern being picked up on here by a lot of these industries. Then we get to, again, another very interesting one, a Chinese fitness equipment maker. So, Wei Lin, the chief executive of PowerTech, a global fitness equipment distributor that manufactures in China, says that if you're asking if I know what I'm going to be paying on my next 2 containers arriving from China, I don't. Neither do our customers or our customs brokers. We asked, of course, right after the announcement, what's our duty so that we can start planning? And they were like, we have no idea. um, Yeah, I really do feel sorry for like a lot of these Chinese businesses because it must be insane to deal with all of this stuff. PowerTech was, of course, founded as a family business back in 1997. We manufacture fitness equipment in Guangdong, a Chinese eastern city in China, and then ship it globally. About 90% of that goes to the US. We've been dealing since tariffs since 2018. We did look, of course, at manufacturing onshore in the US, in the southern states of Tennessee and Alabama, but the incentives are minimal, which is what we talked about before. Oh, yeah, you're going to do all these tariffs. Oh, yeah, come manufacture in the US. Where's the incentive? Where's the opportunity to do it? You've seen it right here. Oh, yeah, we looked into it. Not worth it. No incentive to. So, the increase, of course, of raw materials and labor costs, we calculated that would be our outgoings would at least be 60 to 7% higher. It wasn't feasible. And that was again moving their operation to Tennessee or Alabama. But since November, we've been looking, of course, at contingencies, hoarding cash, looking at costs. We employ over 25 people, most of them in the US, with a couple at least in China. We're going to have a very hard conversation with them, and they might need to be very creative with their compensation. um, I don't understand, of course, what Trump is trying to do. If it was planned out, we'd been given at least a year or two to get to this point. But I think a lot of companies would probably just get on board with it. But I don't think it has been done in the best way. Certainly not in the best way at all. And then, of course, India. This is another interesting one. India, shrimp farmer. News, of course, of Trump's 26% tariff on exports did send shockwaves through India's seafood industry. Shrimp is one of India's biggest agricultural exports to the US, one of the biggest markets for Indian shrimp, and accounting for over 44% of all exports within the market to cost over 3 billion in just recent years. The previous levies on Indian shrimp exports were about 8%. The Prawn Kumar, owner of the Spirit Exports Private Limited, one of India's biggest seafood companies, and whose largest market is the US, says that these new tariffs were devastating for the Indian shrimp industry, and the impact would be severe and create major fiscal stress. He said the US is the most important market for the shrimp industry in India. He said, but now Indian exports will have tariffs of 26%, while other competing countries, such as Ecuador, will only have 10%. This gives a huge advantage to Ecuador, and it means that she will probably replace India as now the largest supplier of shrimp to the US market. And that's the other thing as well. You've been seeing a lot of people say about how, or at least the Brexiteers been claiming, oh, well, now um, European country manufacturers will come to the UK and manufacture in the UK. Why did they have to manufacture in the UK to begin with? All you have to do, move that product into the UK, probably into a warehouse, and then send it on. Northern Ireland. This has big. I haven't even looked into it yet, but I can guarantee you this has big implications for the Windsor Agreement. Like I guarantee you this has big implications for the Windsor Agreement. So expect us probably to be talking about that a lot in the next coming days as well. But Kumar, who is also the president of the Seafood Export Association of India, said that the immediacy of the plan meant that over 2,000 containers of Indian seafood currently in transit would now face these tariffs and would now have to be the exporters such as themselves at an initial estimate cost of 6 billion rupees. That's 54 million pounds. That is insane. He says, of course, the brunt would, of course, be borne by the shrimp farmers, as the uncertainty over the impact of these tariffs on profit margins means that there were now few orders will now be placed. Kumar called upon the Indian government to intervene urgently, to negotiate a deal with the US to exempt seafood from tariffs and to prevent an all-round distress. We'll see what India does to this, but so far, I don't think a lot of governments are going to go to the negotiating table. Don't think a lot of them are going to go to the negotiating table. They also talked to Mexican vegetable farmer, and then this was the one I really wanted to go over. So UK car parts maker. So Michael Burns runs Rise 3D, a Midlands-based manufacturer for automotive parts, and it sends 30% of its volumes to the US for use in hypercars. He said, "These tariffs are, of course, never a good thing in my opinion, and will probably cause us to work with our customers across the pond to now share some of that burden. Probably a 50-50 split," he says. Ultimately, even I can't see this company bearing that 50-50 split. I can't see it. But he continued saying, "We are, of course, very passionate about being a UK technology business that is, of course, disrupting the status quo. That will never change. However, it is now accelerated my thinking and indeed a desire to become a global company and set down additional routes in the USA as soon as we can." Guarantee you, he'll go and look at what that Chinese manufacturer is saying. There's no incentive, no reason. Like I say, Trump is not doing this right. Biden did it right. Where that, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, was literally pulling jobs away, like big tech companies and jobs and startups from Europe and the UK to the US. Trump has ended those. Trump ended those in like that. Those are gone. There's not that incentive there anymore. But again, it would be interesting to see, again, come back to this guy in a year. What does he think of that? Has he moved to the US? Has he found any difficulty? What's his, again, be very interesting on that. But anyway, just continue. This was always going to be part of our long-term plan, but Trump's tariffs have now probably brought it forward by at least about 18 months. It may give us, of course, a way to navigating the additional costs. In the short term, we will continue to innovate and process to become even more efficient and explore new technology that can deliver increased competitiveness. Going forward, what do we want from our government? Put simply, a trade deal ASAP, please, Keir Starmer. Again, probably not likely to happen, if I'm honest. I don't agree, of course, the US president's approach, but of course, there is little doubt that he's trying to, of course, feed his domestic economy, while our own prime minister starves growth in his oath with the ridiculous recent tax rises that we are already going to see damage caused before these tariffs hit. So, interesting times ahead, I think you can say, from a wide range of sectors all around the world, saying these tariffs are bad. We've got no idea what's going to happen. It creates uncertainty. Short term, we're not going to invest. Medium term, we're probably going to invest in different markets to see where those opportunities are. You saw the one from China. Bear in mind, that's a Chinese, manufacturing company that was like, "Yeah, we looked into it before all these tariffs even hit," and it's like, not worth it. This is still gonna get a lot worse, a lot worse. I think we've still barely seen the tip of this iceberg, and it's just gonna keep on continuing. Just gonna keep on continuing, but we'll see which Republican blinks first. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.